Mina transforms into a princess. Jones punishes her stepmother and takes her in a night of fiery passion. Hello, my beautiful listeners and viewers special. I am truly grateful to you for joining this channel. Your support means the world to me. Appreciate each and every one of you. But I've noticed that many of you are listening to these heartfelt, emotional love stories without subscribing. My humble request to you. Please hit that subscribe button. Now it takes just a second for you, but it motivates me endlessly to bring you even more beautiful, passionate, and romantic stories. I pray for love, happiness, and endless blessings fill your life. May you always find the kind of love that makes your dreams become a reality. Your soul shines and your heart races your life. Be filled with warmth, passion, and the beauty of true love. Now I have a special request for you. What was the best moment in today's blockbuster love story? Don't forget to share your comments below because I can't wait to read every single one of them. Thoughts now, let's dive into the story. Mina had always lived a life of fear, trapped in the suffocating walls of her stepmother, Amara's mansion, where love was a foreign concept and pain was her only companion since childhood. She had only experienced daily cruelty and harsh words punishments in the weight of being unwanted. Amara had never once, instead of treating her like a daughter, she viewed Mina as a burden and a fragile doll. Could manipulate for her own gain, the young girl with her angelic beauty, long cascading hair, and innocent doe-like eyes had only one dream: to escape the torment of her stepmother and establish a life in which she was valued, and where love was more than just a distant fantasy. But fate had other plans, cruel yet ironic, as the very woman who tormented her decided to sell her off like a mere object, arranging her marriage with the powerful, ruthless billionaire Jones Harrington, a man feared by many in the business world. He was dominant and arrogant. Mina had heard his name before, whispered in low tones, and dangerously influential, a man whose presence alone could send shivers down anyone's spine the moment Amara made the deal. Mina's heart shattered. She had no say, no voice, no escape. She was forced into a wedding gown that was both elegant and suffocating. Amara tightened her grip on the delicate wrists, warning her in a venomous whisper, "Don't you dare embarrass me in front of him. Mina, this marriage will bring me wealth, and if you ruin it, you'll regret ever being born." Tears welled up in Mina's eyes, but she knew better than to resist because she had never been given a choice and had always been a puppet, and tonight was not one of those nights. Different as she was forced into the grand wedding hall, her breath hitched when she saw him. Jones Harrington, the man who now owned her. He stood tall, exuding raw power, his dark eyes sharp and unreadable, his strong jawline. He watched her with such intensity that she fell to her knees, sculpted like a masterpiece and wearing an impeccable black suit. Weak Mina couldn't breathe under his gaze, but she couldn't look away either. He was terrifyingly handsome, a man who could control a room without speaking a word. She had anticipated indifference, if not outright resentment. Considering how this marriage was nothing but a transaction, but what she didn't expect was the way his eyes darkened with intrigue as he studied her. Her innocence, her trembling lips, the way she clutched the fabric of her gown, as if she was trying to hold herself together. Something flickered in his gaze, a silent acknowledgement that this girl, this fragile beauty, was now his. The vows were exchanged, though Mina could barely register the words. Her heart pounded as Jones slid a ring onto her finger, his touch firm yet strangely gentle. The moment their marriage was sealed, the weight of reality crashed down on her. She was no longer just Mina the unwanted. She was now Mina Harrington, the stepdaughter of a billionaire who was married to a man. Mina's fear only grew as they entered the grand estate that was now her home. She had no idea who they were. Vast, elegant, yet cold, much like the man beside her. The silence between them was deafening as he led her to their bedroom, a space that screamed power, dominance, and intimacy. Her heart pounded as she stood near the bed, feeling his presence looming behind her. She didn't know what to expect. Would he be cruel like Amara? Would he see her as nothing but a woman forced into his life? Her hands clenched the fabric of her dress, her mind swirling in the dark. But then something unexpected happened. Jones stepped closer, his voice deep, laced with something unreadable. "Are you afraid of me?" The question made her shiver, but she couldn't lie. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. A glint of something crossed his face instead of amusement or rage. Was it curiosity? His fingers brushed against her chin, tilting her face up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "You shouldn't be," he murmured, his eyes tracing every delicate feature of her face. "You're not a prisoner here." Mina was shocked by the words. She had anticipated dominance and coldness, but instead there was something different in his tone, an unspoken promise. Her heart pounded as he moved closer, his heat intoxicating. She knew tonight was inevitable. She was now his wife, but for the first time in her life she wondered, was it possible that this man, the feared billionaire, would treat her differently from the world that had always hurt her? Mina stood frozen in the grand bedroom, her delicate hands clinging to the hem of her gown, and her fearful eyes are wide, darted toward Jones, who was now loosening the buttons of his black suit jacket, his intense gaze never leaving her trembling form. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for escape, and her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, for she knew that this night was inevitable, that she had been forced into this marriage, and now she was a part of this man, a man whose very presence sent a shiver down her spine, not from fear alone, but from an unfamiliar emotion that curled in the pit of her stomach, something raw and confused using. She had expected cruelty, expected him to treat her as nothing more than just a thing, as her stepmother had always warned her men to be. But there was something unsettling different about Jones, something in the way he looked at her, as if he was seeing through every layer of her innocence, through the fear, through the uncertainty, straight into her soul. "You're trembling." His voice was deep, almost amused, but not in a mocking way, more like he was fascinated by her reaction, and that only made her knees weaker as he took slow, measured steps toward her. She flinched when he reached out his fingers, brushing against her bare shoulder, sending an electric current through her skin, and she gasped, startled by the sensation. "Are you afraid of me?" "Mina?" he asked again, his voice lower this time, more intimate, and she swallowed hard. She hesitated, unsure of how to respond, as her lips parted and she struggled to speak. Because yes, she was afraid, but not in the way she had been of Amara, not in the way she had feared cruelty and pain, but in a different way, a way that made her heart pound and her stomach twist with nerves. He let out a slow exhale, his eyes examining her with a gentleness that suggested he was trying to comprehend her storm of emotions. Completely contradicted the powerful, dominant aura he carried, he reached up and tucked a strand of her long, silky hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek for just a moment too long. "I won't hurt you," he murmured. His Mina saw something for the first time flicker in his gaze, something that was almost tender, his voice now soft and almost tender. Wasn't coldness, wasn't indifference, but something danger, ously close to curiosity, maybe even desire. Her breath hitched as he stepped closer, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, and her eyes flickered to his lips for a fleeting second before she quickly averted her gaze, her cheeks flushing with a warmth that she did not comprehend. "You need not be afraid of me," he repeated, his fingers tracing a feathery path down her arm, and she shuddered under his touch, unable to comprehend why her body reacted this way, why his presence made her feel so unstable. She had prepared herself for the worst and expected a night of forced submission. Yet here he was, watching her with something almost protective in his gaze, as if he had no intention of taking her against her will. The thought sent a strange relief through her, but it also made her wonder, which made her even more perplexed. Who was Jones Harrington? Really, was he the ruthless, dominant billionaire everyone feared, or was there something more beneath the surface, something deeper, something that only she would come to see as the silence stretched between them, thick with tension? Mina took a deep breath that she hadn't realized she had been taking before the man pulled away, stepping back just a little. "Holding you should change," he said simply, his voice turning to its usual deep, authoritative tone, though there was still a softness there that hadn't been present before. I'll be back with that. He turned and disappeared into the adjoining bathroom, leaving Mina standing in the center of the massive bedroom, her heart racing, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't quite grasp. She swallowed hard, her fingers brushing against the spot where, after he had touched her, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of this marriage for the first time that night. Was not the nightmare she had expected it to be? Perhaps just, perhaps Jones Harrington was not the monster she had feared. Mina stood in the middle of the enormous bedroom, her heart pounding so violently in her chest that she was certain Jones could hear it, even from her delicate fingers, clenched the fabric of her gown in the bathroom, where he had vanished just a few moments earlier. She struggled to comprehend the storm of emotions raging inside her, because everything about tonight, about this forced marriage, about the man who now stood as her husband, was unpredictable, terrifying, and yet in a way she couldn't understand, thrilling. She was forced to follow an uncharted path because she had long held the belief that men were cruel. Love was a fairy tale meant for other people. It never happened to her that she existed, only to be used and discarded, just as Mara had done her entire life. And yet Jones Harrington, the powerful billionaire feared by so many, had not looked at her with disdain, had not treated her as an object to be possessed. But rather there was something else in his gaze, something dark, yet protective, something that made her skin tingle and her pulse race, and she did not know if she should be afraid of it or surrender to it, because every inch of his presence made her feel something she had never felt before. Seen, noticed, as if for the first time in her life, she was not invisible, and it made her breathless, made her stomach coil with an unfamiliar anticipation, and she knew that tonight everything would change, that this man had the power to break her or to turn her into someone she never thought she could be. And just as her thoughts spiraled further into chaos, the bathroom door opened and Jones stepped out, his presence immediately, overwhelming every inch of space between them, his broad shoulders casting an imposing shadow, his sharp features unreadable, and yet it was not his power that left her speechless. It was the way he fixed his attention on her gloomy evaluation, as if he could read every fear, every hesitation in her mind, and he took slow, deliberate steps towards her, each movement making her nerves coil tighter until he stood just inches from her. Perfume was intoxicating. His heat was oppressive, and he held her for a long time, simply stared at her, the air between them thick with something neither of them to name, until he finally reached out and lightly stroked her wrist, sending chills down her spine through her entire being. And when she gasped softly, he smirked, a ghost of amusement flickering in his dark eyes, as if he enjoyed seeing the effect he had on her. And then, without warning, he lifted her hand, his fingers tracing slow circles against her palm, before he murmured, his voice deep and authoritative, yet strangely gentle. "You don't have to be afraid, Mina." And the way he said her name, like a vow, like a secret, sent an unfamiliar warmth through her, making her feel things she had never felt before. And she wanted to look away, wanted to hide from the intensity of his gaze, but she couldn't, because there was something hypnotic about him, something that made her heart stutter, something that made her desire to believe that she might not have been a prisoner in this marriage, that maybe this man, this dangerous, powerful man, would not hurt her the way the world always had. And then, as if sensing her thoughts, he released her hand and stepped back, his once more unreadable, and he said something in a low, firm voice that changed into something else. "Comfortable. You don't need to wear that heavy gown anymore." And for a moment she hesitated, her fingers clutching the fabric even tighter, because the idea of dressing in front of him sent a fresh wave of nervousness through her. But before she could protest, he turned away, walking toward the massive bed and sitting down, his gaze now fixed on the fireplace, as if giving her the privacy she needed. And something about that simple gesture made. She felt her chest tighten, because it was unexpected and not the act of a man who wanted to rule over her, but rather of a man who wanted her to feel safe. And for the first time she allowed herself to wonder, was it possible that Jones Harrington was not the monster she had been told to fear, but rather the man who could rewrite the destiny she had been forced into? With trembling fingers, she reached for the silk nightgown that had been left for her. And as she changed, she could feel his presence behind her, unwavering, strong. And when she finally turned to face him, she found him watching her again, his expression unreadable, but his gaze burning with something deep that made her heart beat faster. And then the silence of the night. He extended his hand towards her, an invitation, a challenge, a promise. And though every instinct in her screamed to run to hide, she found herself stepping forward, found herself drawn to him like a moth to a flame. And as her fingers hesitated, still he reached for his. She knew this night, this moment would change everything. Mia's fingers trembled as they hesitantly brushed against Jones's outstretched hand, her pulse hammering so loudly in her ears that she could barely hear anything else. Her breath caught somewhere between fear and something much deeper, something unnamed, something that made her entire body feel weightless, yet unbearably tense at the same time. And as her veins were warmed by the unfamiliar heat of the palm's warmth. Feel as though she had entered a world she didn't recognize, one in which she wasn't visible at all. Discarded but rather desired scene claimed, and it made her heart race in a way that was terrifying yet intoxicating, because all her life she had been nothing more than a shadow in her own home, an afterthought beneath his cruelty. Yet here in this moment, standing before a man who possessed the power to own anything and anyone he wanted, she felt something she hadn't felt before, powerful in her own way, as if her presence had shook him inside. Something he did not expect, something that was making him watch her with an intensity that made it impossible to breathe as he gently pulled her toward him, slowly leading her there. Deliberate movements she did not resist, did not fight, because though she did not know what awaited her, there was a strange trust forming between them, a fragile, delicate thing that neither of them fully understood. But it was there, lingering in the charged air, between them, making her heart pound as she found herself standing between his legs, his strong arms resting on either side of her, his dark eyes gleaming with something incomprehensible as he raised his head to gaze at her. That made her throat dry, and just as she was about to be swallowed by the silence between them, he reached up his fingers, barely grazing the thin strap of her silk nightgown. His touch feather light, yet so potent that it sent a shiver down her spine, and she inhaled sharply, her skin burning beneath the trail of his touch, because never before had she been touched like this. Never before had anyone looked at her as if she was something precious, something to be handled with care. And yet here he was, the man she had been forced to marry, the man she had feared would treat her like an object, watching her with an intensity that made her feel like the most important thing in the world. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough, filled with something that sent warmth pooling in the deepest part of her stomach. "You're still shaking," and he noticed that his fingers were making slow, torturous patterns against. She swallowed hard through her skin, unable to speak and unable to do anything else. Stand there lost in the way he made her feel. And it was maddening, this helplessness, this vulnerability, because she had spent her life trying to disappear, trying to become small, unnoticed, yet with him she felt exposed in the most dangerous way, as if he could see every thought, every fear, every hesitation. And yet despite it all, she did not pull away, did not retreat, because there was something about the way he touched her, something about the way his gaze darkened with each shaky breath she took, that made her want to learn more about him, to comprehend why she felt this way about him. Then her own hand moved in the direction of D before she could stop or fully comprehend what she was doing. Hesitant but determined, her fingertips brushing against his strong jaw, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her touch. And the moment she did, his breath hitched, his muscles tensing slightly, as if she had unwittingly caught him off guard. And the realization thrilled her, because for the first time she saw it the way her presence affected him, just as much as it affected her. And it gave her a sense of control she'd never known, a sense of power she had never thought she could possess. And when his fingers suddenly curled around her wrist, firm yet not forceful, she met his gaze with wide eyes, her lips parting as he murmured, his voice lower, now rougher. "You don't even know what you do to me." And his frank tone made her stomach flip, because no, she didn't. She didn't understand any of this, didn't understand why her heart felt like it was about to burst, why the room suddenly felt too small, why his grip on her sent a fire that ran through her veins and made her want to get closer rather than step back. And this power was terrifying. Had over her, but what was even more terrifying was the power she seemed to have over him. And then before she could dwell on it any longer, before she could convince herself to retreat into the safety of distance, he pulled her down slowly, deliberately, until she was straddling his lap, her legs on either side of his, and the feeling of being so close, of feeling his body against hers, despite only being held together by silk, made her entire body shudder, made her breath come in rapid, uneven gasps, and he watched her, his expression unreadable, his grip firm, yet not forceful, and then as if testing her, as if waiting to see if she would run, he leaned in his lips as he whispered, "Tell me to stop, and I will," barely rubbing his ear. Her chest tightened due to the quiet promise and weight of those words. Because she knew without a doubt that he meant it, that despite the fact that his hands were clenched slightly around her waist, he wouldn't force her. He wouldn't accept her for who she was, not ready to give. And it made her heart ache because she had expected to be used to be taken without care. Yet here he was giving her a choice, giving her power, and it made her want to trust him, made her want to believe that maybe she was not just another pawn in this cruel world. And so instead of telling, she only hesitated for a moment before telling him to stop instead of pulling away. Slowly, cautiously letting her hands rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady heartbeat under her fingers, his breath pressing his hands against her waist. And at that exact instant, she understood she was not the only one affected by this, by whatever it was between them, and it gave her the courage to meet his gaze, to hold it, as she whispered, voice barely audible but strong, "I don't want you to stop." And the instant the words left her lips, his expression changed, darkened with something primal, something possessive, and then with a groan he pulled her closer, capturing her lips in a kiss that stole every last breath from her lungs, a kiss that was not just passion, but something more substantial, something that signaled the beginning of something neither of them was prepared for yet, could deny. And as he lifted her, carrying her toward the bed, she knew nothing would ever be the same again. Mina woke up to the sensation of her body was still tangled in the traces of last night's passion, and her skin was tingling where Jones had claimed her. And as her eyes fluttered open, the soft golden sunlight streaming through the curtains cast a delicate glow over the room, illuminating the luxurious space that still smelled of him, of them, of the fire that had consumed them in the depths of the night. And for a moment she could not move, could not comprehend how her world had shifted so drastically, and how in just a single night everything had changed, because all her life she had been nothing more than a puppet in Amara's cruel hands, a girl who was never given the freedom to dream, to desire, to belong, to herself. But now, her body aching as she lay in the soft silk sheets, deliciously from the way Jones had worshipped her, she felt something she had never felt before, wanted, cherished, and despite the fact that she was unfamiliar with everything, and despite the lingering ambiguity, she could not deny the way her heart ached at the thought of him, the way her body craved his touch even now, and as if recognizing that even in the morning's quiet moments, her thoughts seemed to be drawn to her. She felt the bed shift beneath his weight, his strong arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her against the solid heat of his chest, and the instant his lips brushed against the bare skin of her shoulder, a soft gasp escaped her lips, her breath hitching as a shiver ran down her spine. Because even though they had already crossed that forbidden line, even though he had taken her innocence in a night of fiery passion, the way he touched her now, the way his lips lingered against her skin was just as intoxicating, just as overwhelming. And when his voice came rough with sleep, yet laced with something deeper, something that sent her heart racing, she felt herself melt against him. "You're awake," he murmured as he traced lazy patterns with his fingers along her stomach, sending waves of heat through her, and she could only nod, unable to find her voice, unable to think past the sensation of his lips moving lower, of his breath ghosting over her sensitive skin. And just when she thought she would drown, and just when she thought she would lose herself, the intensity of everything. Completely, he rolled her over onto her back so he could examine her, his gloomy eyes looking into hers with an intensity that made her tremble. And for the first time she saw something in them that she had never seen before. Something raw, something unguarded, something that caused a painful clench in her heart, and she had to stop herself before she could flee into her safety. Uncertainty. She reached up her fingers, hesitantly, brushing against his cheek. He let out a quiet sigh when she did, when her touch touched his skin. Almost tortured groan, as if he was barely holding himself back, as if the mere act of her touching him unraveled something deep within him. And then before she could pull away, before she could second-guess herself, he captured her wrist, bringing her hand to his lips. Grasping her palm and kissing her, the gentle touch made her chest tighten, made something warm and unfamiliar bloom inside her, because she had never been touched with such care, never been looked at with such reverence, and it terrified her, the way he made her feel, the way he stripped her of every wall she had ever built around herself, without even trying, and as if sensing her turmoil, as if understanding the chaos in her head, as he leaned down to rest his forehead against hers and exhaled. Fanning over her lips as he whispered, "You're mine now, Mina." And the possessiveness in his voice, the quiet promise hidden beneath the words, sent a shiver through her, because she knew he meant it, knew that he would never let her go, and she did not want him to for the first time. Run from the feelings that threatened to consume her, and so instead of pushing him away, instead of fighting against the inevitable, she let herself get lost in him, let herself believe that perhaps this was the right place for her. And as his lips touched hers, once more, as he pulled her beneath him and made her his all over again, she knew there was no turning back now, no escaping the fire that had ignited between them. And as she surrendered to her to the core, as she allowed herself to be consumed by their passion, she came to a realization that shaken her to her core. She was falling for him, falling for the man she had been forced to marry. And no matter how much she tried to deny it, no matter how much she tried to ignore the way her heart pounded at the mere thought of him, she knew that it was already too late, because Jones had claimed not just her body, but her soul. She was powerless to stop it, powerless to fight the love that was consuming her. As she spoke, lay in his arms, as she listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, she knew she would never be the same again, because Jones had not just taken her innocence, he had taken her heart, and she could only hope that he would cherish it as much as she had begun to cherish him. Mina lay in Jones's arms, her breath still uneven, her body flushed from the ferocious passion they had just shared. Despite the closeness and the way he had made her feel like she was the most precious thing in the world, a lingering uncertainty still tugged at the edges of her mind, because this man, this powerful and domineering, she had no idea who the billionaire was, who had claimed her in every way imaginable, still someone she had been forced to marry. And even though he had treated her with more tenderness than she had ever known, even though he had held her as if she was something fragile, something sacred, she could not shake the fear that this was all temporary, that he would become so dissatisfied with her that he would abandon her, as Amar had always done. And the mere thought sent a sharp pang through her chest, making her tighten her grip on the sheet wrapped around her trembling body. But before she could drown in her thoughts, before she could let the uncertainty consume her, Jones shifted beside her, his strong arm tightening around her waist as he pulled her closer, his lips brushing against the crown of her head, and the warmth of his touch, his steady breathing, ought to have been enough to calm her. But instead, it only made her more aware of just how much power he had over her, how easily he could break her if he ever chose to walk away. And yet, despite the fear, despite the vulnerability, she could not bring herself to move, could not bring herself to put distance between them, because something about the way he held her, and something about the gentle possessiveness in his touch, led her to believe that she might have been referring to something to him too. And as if reading her thoughts, as if sensing the turmoil raging within her, Jones suddenly spoke, his voice rough, laced with an unfamiliar emotion that made her heart skip a beat. "Mina, stop thinking so much," he murmured. Shivers ran down his spine as he traced delicate patterns across her exposed shoulder, down her spine, and before she could respond, before she could even gather her thoughts, he tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his intense gaze. And What she saw there, the raw intensity, the quiet desperation, stole the breath from her lungs. Because for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his eyes, something unguarded, and it made her. Her throat became dry as her chest tightened, and before she could stop herself, she could retreat into the safety of her silence. She whispered, "Why me, Jones? Why are you being like this with me?" And the moment the words left her lips, the air between them shifted, something unspoken, passing between them. His jaw clenched as he tightened his grip on her, as if he were struggling to express something. And for a moment she thought he would not answer, thought he would pull away. But then before she could brace herself, before she could prepare for the intensity of his words, he cued her face in his hands, his thumbs grazing over her cheekbones with a tenderness that contradicted the fire burning in his eyes. "Because you make me feel things I never thought I could feel." He admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, and the sheer honesty in his tone, the way he looked at her as if she were the only thing that mattered, which made her breath catch and make her heart beat faster because of this. Man, this powerful billionaire, who had the entire world at his feet, was looking at her as if she was his entire world. And the realization was terrifying, overwhelming. But she knew deep down that she wanted it, because she wanted him to believe that what they had, what they shared, was real. And so instead of, she let herself be in the moment and let herself believe in them despite pulling away, rather than questioning his words. Emotions she saw reflected in his eyes, and as his lips descended upon hers once more, as he claimed her with a hunger that sent heat rushing through her veins, she was aware that she was falling hard, and that she could not escape the love that had begun to consume her. And as he pulled her beneath him, as he whispered her name against her skin, she realized that for the first time in her life, she was not afraid, not uncertain, because she felt secure, loved, and like she belonged in his arms. She belonged, and no matter what the future held, no matter what challenges awaited them, she knew that as long as he was by her side, as long as he stared at her with the same level of intensity as before. Quiet dedication, because Jones had not only taken her body, but also taken her soul, and she was powerless to fight it, powerless to resist the love that had begun to bloom between them. And as the night stretched on, as passion ignited once more between them, she realized she was his, completely, irrevocably, and no matter what happened, no matter how much the world tried to, she would never regret tearing them apart or giving in to the man, who had not only claimed her, but had also made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. And as she lay in his arms, as she listened to the steady beat of his heart, she allowed herself to believe and hope that she had finally discovered the love she had always dreamed of, the love she had always been denied. And with that thought, with that quiet assurance, as she fell asleep, her body untouched, wrapped in the warmth of his embrace, her heart beating in sin with his, as if they had been meant to meet, as if their love had been written in the stars long before they met. And in that moment, she knew Jones was hers just as much as she was his, and nothing, not even the ghosts of her past, could change that, because what they had, what they shared, was something far stronger, something much more profound than either of them could ever express. And as the first rays of the rising sun filtered through the windows, casting a golden glow over their entwined bodies, she knew that this was only the beginning of their love story, which was just beginning. And regardless what obstacles awaited them, no matter what trials they would have to face, she would face them all as long as she had him, for as long as she could remember the man who had not only altered her life, but also made her feel like she was worth loving. And with that thought, with that quiet commitment, she made to the new day and the next chapter in their love story, knowing that she would never be alone, no matter what happened in the future again, because Jones had claimed her, and he was never going to let her go. Mina woke up in the warmth of Jones's embrace, her body still tangled with his, as the golden morning light flowed through the curtains, illuminating their intertwined bodies gently. For a moment she simply lay there, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, feeling the way his arms instinctively tightened around her, even in sleep, as if he couldn't bear to let her go. And the realization sent a rush of warmth through her, an unfamiliar but intoxicating sensation that she found herself unable to look away from the man who had not only claimed a body, but had also begun to weave his way as she drew his jaws sharp lines into her soul's darkest recesses. She couldn't help but wonder how a man like him could be so gentle, so powerful, so commanding, could hold her with such tenderness as if she was the most fragile thing in his world. And just as she was lost in her thoughts, just as she was trying to grasp the intensity of her own emotions, Jones stirred his eyes. They locked onto hers in the way he looked before slowly opening, dark and piercing. At her, the way his gaze burned with something raw and unspoken made her breath catch, made her pulse quicken, because there was something about the way he saw her, something about the way he touched her, that made her feel like she was the only woman in existence distance. And before she could say a word, before she could even process the emotions raging within her, he reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her skin. As he murmured, "You're staring at little one," his sleepy but laced voice was with amusement, and she felt her cheeks heat, embarrassed that he had caught her in such a vulnerable moment. But before she could look away, before she could retreat into her usual shyness, he kept her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing slow, deliberate circles along her cheeks, forcing her to look at him. She noticed the quiet intensity, the hued emotion sent a shiver through her, because for the first time she saw something deeper in his eyes, something far more dangerous than mere desire. And she was terrified of it, because if she allowed herself leave it, if she let herself fall, she knew there would be no turning back. There was no way out of the grip he had on her heart, but she had to get over her fear before she could let doubt creep in. Jones leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss so slow, so devastatingly deep, that she felt herself melt against him, felt herself surrender to the pull of his touch. And as he rolled them over, as he pressed her beneath him, with a hunger that sent fire seeing through her veins, she knew there was no denying it anymore. She was already his in every possible way, so there was no way to fight the inevitable. And as his lips trailed down the column of her throat, as his hands roamed her body with a possessiveness that left no room for doubt, she let herself become submerged in him and forgot about everything else. The way he made her feel, because in his arms, she was not the scared, fragile girl who'd been thrown away by the only family she had ever known in his arms. She was cherished, wanted, and loved. And the realization was sufficient to bring tears to her eyes, enough to make her clutch onto him as if he was the only thing that held her in place. And maybe he was, in a way, because Jones was. Not only was he the one who saved her from her cruel stepmother, but he was also the one who gave her something much more important, something she had never dared to dream of. He had given her a place to belong, a love that burned so fiercely, so completely, that it consumed every part of her. And as the hours passed, as the passion between them turned from desperate to slow, from fiery to unbearably tender, she knew she could never go back, could never live a life. Despite the fact that he was now woven into every breath and every heartbeat, and the thought should have scared her, should have made her wary of how deeply she had fallen. But instead, it only caused her to cling to him more tightly, only caused her to whisper his name with such devotion that there was no room for skepticism. And when he finally pulled away, when he finally looked down at her with something dangerously close to reverence, she was absolutely certain that he felt the same way, and that he was just as lost in her as she was in him. And as he brushed a kiss against her forehead, as he whispered words so soft, so filled with quiet longing, she felt her heart shatter and reassemble itself simultaneously, because whatever was between them was not fleeting, something that could be erased or ignored. It was something real, something permanent. And no matter how much the world tried to tear them apart, no matter how many shadows of her past tried to haunt her, she knew one thing without absolute certainty: she was his. And he, because Jones was more than just a man who had taken her, he was never going to let her go. He was a man who had claimed her in every possible way. And as he pulled her into his arms, as he held her close, she was absolutely certain that she would drown every night and moment in the love that had consumed them both. And with that thought, with that quiet certainty, she let herself close her eyes. She let herself fall asleep, knowing that when she awoke, he would still be there, just waiting for her to open her eyes. As he always had been, just as he always would be, because Jones was not just a lover, not just a husband. He was her home, despite everything, including her demons. Past could ever take that away from her. Mina had never known what it truly meant to be loved until Jones entered her life, and as the days passed, as he continued to shower her with an affection so intense, so consuming, that it left her breathless. She found herself falling deeper, sinking further into a world where his touch, his gaze, and his very presence became the air she breathed, where he was the center of everything force that anchored her to a reality that no longer felt cruel and unforgiving, but instead wrapped her in warmth, in a tenderness she'd never thought she would experience. And every night as he pulled her into his arms, as she felt herself falling apart, as he spoke words of longing into her skin, felt the walls she had built for years crumbling under the weight of his love. Because Jones was not just a man who wanted her more than just a husband who had adopted her. He was the one who had transformed her, the one who had turned a frightened, broken girl into a woman who knew what it meant to be died, to be wanted in a way that consumed her soul, and left her lying in his arms now, her body still shaking from their passion. She looked up at him to see how dark he was. Eyes traced her features as if memorizing every inch of her, and she realized in that moment that she was not. She was simply in love with him and was forever his in body, heart, and soul. And there was no turning back, no escaping the intensity of what they had built between them. And when he reached out, when he brushed his fingers along her jaw, tilting her chin so that she had no choice but to meet his gaze, she saw it there. The same realization, the same hunger that had nothing to do with physical desire and everything to do with the undeniable, unbreakable bond that had formed between them. And as his lips met hers, as he kissed her with a slowness that sent a shiver through her, she melted, she surrendered, because there was no use fighting it anymore. No use pretending that this was anything less than forever. And as he rolled her beneath him, as he traced his lips down her throat, down the curve of her shoulder, she let herself drown in him. Let herself forget the shadows of her past, because in Joan's arms, she was no longer Mina, the girl who had been cast aside, the girl who had known nothing but pain and cruelty. She was Mina, the woman he worshipped, the woman he would spend eternity loving, and as he whispered her name, as he made her feel things she had never imagined possible, she knew that no matter what the world threw their way, no matter what challenges awaited them, she would never again be alone. Because she had Jones and Jones had her, and nothing, not even time itself, could ever change that. And as the night stretched on, as their bodies tangled together in a dance of passion and longing, she realized that this was not just love, not just desire. This was devotion, this was obsession, and she welcomed it. She embraced it because if this was what it meant to belong to Jones, then she would gladly be his for the rest of her life. And as the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, casting a golden glow over them, she reached out, traced the sharp lines of his face, and whispered the words she had been too afraid to say, before the words that had been burning in her heart for so long. And as she spoke them, as she told him that she loved him, truly, deeply, irrevocably, she saw something shift in his gaze, saw something raw and unguarded flash in his eyes before he crushed her against him, before he claimed her lips in a kiss, so fierce, so consuming, that it stole the very breath from her lungs. And in that moment, in that heartbeat, she knew that she had given him the only thing that mattered, the only thing he had ever truly craved, not just her body, not just her submission, but her heart, her love. And as he held her close, as he whispered words of devotion against her skin, she knew that she had made the right choice, that she had found the one person in this world who would never let her go, who would fight for her, protect her, worship her until the end of time. And as sleep claimed her, as she drifted into a world where only he existed, she knew with absolute certainty that she would wake up to him, that she would spend every moment of her life wrapped in his love. And as his arms tightened around her, as his breath fanned against her skin, she knew that she had finally found her forever, and there was nothing in this world that could ever take it away. Mina woke up to the warmth of Jones's arms wrapped around her, his steady breathing against her skin as the morning sunlight streamed through the grand windows of their luxurious bedroom, bathing them in a golden glow that made everything feel surreal. as if the world outside didn't exist, as if nothing mattered except the man who held her, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And as she slowly opened her eyes, she found herself gazing at his face. His sharp features softened in sleep. His lips slightly parted, his powerful arm securing her against his bare chest in a way that made her heart swell with emotions she had never known before, because she had never imagined a life where she could wake up feeling safe, cherished, and loved. Beyond reason, and as she traced her fingers along his jaw, feeling the roughness of his stubble, she marveled at how much her life had changed. How the man who was once a stranger, the man she had feared on their wedding night, had now become her entire world. The man she loved with every fiber of her being, and as if sensing her touch, Jane stirred his arms, tightening around her, as his eyes slowly fluttered open, revealing the deep intensity of his gaze that always sent shivers down her spine. And the moment their eyes met, a slow, lazy smile spread across his lips, a smile that was filled with adoration, passion, and something deeper, something that told her that she was the only thing that mattered to him. And before she could even form a coherent thought, before she could say a single word, he pulled her closer, burying his face in the crook of her neck, his warm breath fanning against her skin as he murmured her name, in a voice that was still heavy with sleep but filled with undeniable longing. And just like that, the fire between them ignited once more, because with Jones there was no escape from the passion that consumed them, no escape from the way he made her feel, as if she were the center of his universe. And as his lips trailed down her shoulder, as his hands caressed her, with a possessiveness that sent her heart racing, she knew that she was completely and utterly his, just as he was hers. And as the morning stretched into a haze of whispered promises and unrelenting passion, Mina found herself drowning in the love that bound them together, in the way Jones worshipped her with every touch, every kiss, every whispered word that left her breathless. And by the time they finally pulled away from each other, tangled in the sheets, completely spent, fell as Jones took her in his arms and danced with her beneath the soft glow of the chandelier. She knew that nothing could ever come between them, that no matter what shadows from the past tried to creep in, they would always have each other, always have this love that burned brighter than anything she had ever known. And as she looked up at the man who had become her everything, the man who had turned her world upside down and made her believe in love, she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, because for the first time in her life she was truly undeniably happy. And as Jones leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that left her breathless, she knew that their love story was only just beginning, that there were still so many moments waiting to be lived, so many nights filled with passion, so many dreams to be shared. And as she surrendered herself to his embrace once more, she knew without a doubt that this was forever. Mina had never imagined that her life, once filled with fear, loneliness, and the constant torment of her cruel stepmother Amara, would transform into something so breathtakingly beautiful, so overwhelmingly filled with love, passion, and a sense of belonging she had never known before. But as she lay in the arms of Jones, the powerful, possessive millionaire who had become her husband, her protector, her entire world, she felt as if she were living in a dream where she was cherished beyond measure, adored beyond reason, and loved with a depth so profound that it stole her breath away, because every moment with Jones was an endless symphony of passion and devotion, an unbreakable bond that tied them together in ways that neither of them could fully comprehend. And as she gazed up at his face, her heart swelled with emotion so intense that they left her trembling, because in his eyes she saw a love so deep, so consuming, that it made her feel as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. And the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he whispered her name with such reverence, it all made her realize that she had become the center of his world, just as he had become the center of her. And as the night stretched on, as the moon cast its silver glow through the massive windows of their bedroom, Mina felt herself melting into his embrace, losing herself in the warmth of his touch, the intensity of his gaze, the possessiveness of his hold. Because with Jones, every night was a celebration of their love, a reaffirmation of the passion that burned between them, an endless dance of desire and devotion that neither of them could resist. And as he pulled her closer, his fingers tracing delicate patterns along her skin, she shivered under his touch, her heart racing as she felt the undeniable heat that always ignited between them. Because no matter how many times he touched her, no matter how many nights they spent tangled in each other's arms, it always felt new, always felt exhilarating, as if their love grew stronger with each passing second, as if the fire between them only burned brighter with time. And as his lips found hers, as he kissed her, with a hunger that left her breathless, she surrendered to the overwhelming tide of emotions, to the love that consumed them both. Because with Jones, there was no hesitation, no fear, no doubt, only an all-encompassing passion that left her trembling in his arms. And as he whispered her name, as he told her how much he adored her, how much he needed her, how she had become the very air he breathed, Mina felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes because never in her life had she imagined being loved like this. Never had she thought she would find a man who would cherish her so completely, so obsessively. And as she clung to him, as she lavished every ounce of her affection on him, even though she was aware without a shadow of a doubt that she belonged to him as well as to him. The night stretched on the stars outside bore witness to the unbreakable bond between them. Mina felt as if she were floating in a world where nothing existed except for the love they shared. A world where she was his queen, his princess, his everything. And as he held her close, as he whispered sweet promises against her skin, she knew that she would spend the rest of her life loving him, just as he would spend the rest of his life worshiping her. And as they finally drifted into sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, hearts beating in perfect harmony, Mina knew that this was just the beginning of a love story that would never end. Mina had never imagined that love could feel this way, that her life once overshadowed by fear and loneliness could transform into something so breathtakingly beautiful. But as she lay in the arms of her husband Jones, the man who had become the very air she breathed, she felt like she belonged and was loved beyond measure because she was with him every moment, was filled with passion, every glance was filled with unspoken promises, and his touch was a sign of how much he loved her, and that he was the golden light of their grand windows, let the morning light in, creating a soft glow upon their tangled limbs. Mina found herself staring at the man who had not only saved her from the torment of her cruel stepmother Amara, but had also given her a life she never dared to dream of, a life where she was loved unconditionally, treasured like a princess, and worshipped in ways that left her breathless. And as she traced her fingers over the sharp lines of his jaw, marveling at the warmth of his skin beneath her touch, she felt a surge of emotion so intense that they made her heart beat faster because she had discovered Jones, protector, her soulmate, her forever. And as if sensing her gaze, his deep, mesmerizing eyes fluttered open, locking onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. And in that moment, she saw everything in them: desire, passion, obsession, and a love so ferocious that it made her breath catch. And before she could even form a coherent thought, before she could whisper his name, he pulled her closer, his strong arms caging her against him, as if he were afraid she would disappear, as if he needed to feel her warmth, her heartbeat, her very existence against his own to be at peace. And as he buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent as if it were the most intoxicating thing in the world, she felt the unmistakable fire between them ignite. The familiar spark burned brighter every time he touched her, every time he whispered her name in that deep, possessive voice that made her knees weak. And as his lips brushed against her skin, sending a wave of heat coursing through her veins, she knew that no matter how many times he held her like this, no matter how many nights they spent lost in each other, it would always feel new, always feel exhilarating, as if their love was a flame that could never be extinguished. And as he whispered against her ear, his voice thick with sleep and unspoken need, telling her how much he adored her, how he could never get enough of her, how she was his everything, Mina felt her heart swell with emotion so overwhelming that they left her trembling in his embrace, because never in her life had she known what it felt like to be loved like this, to be the center of someone's universe, to be wanted so desperately that it bordered on madness, and as she gazed into his eyes, as she saw the raw, unfiltered love that burned in them, she knew without a doubt that she belonged to him just as much as he belonged to her. And as he leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss so deep, so consuming, that it stole the very breath from her lungs, she surrendered to the passion that had become an inseparable part of their love, a passion that only grew stronger with each passing moment. And as the hours melted away in a haze of whispered confessions, stolen touches, and unrelenting desire, Mina found herself lost in him, lost in the way he treated her like the most valuable thing in the world. And by the time the sun had climbed high in the sky, by the time they finally pulled away from each other, their bodies tangled in the silk sheet, their hearts beating as one, she realized that this was happiness. This was love in its purest, most intoxicating form. And as Jones brushed his fingers through her, she knew that no matter what happened, no matter how tenderly he looked at her, she would not. They would always have each, no matter what shadows from the past tried to do to get in. Other people always have this love that was more intense than anything she had ever experienced. And as the day went on, as he repeatedly took her into his arms, Jones refused to let her go. Mina realized that she had never spoken sweet promises against her skin, truly lived until she met him, when she became his, and throughout their time together, afternoon spent ensconced in one another, lost in kisses that spoke of eternity, she knew that this was just the beginning of a love story that would never end, one that would endure time. And Jones told her he would spend every day of his life with her by pressing his forehead against hers. Demonstrating just how much he loved her, she smiled, knowing she had always known, and she was aware of that as he kissed her once more while holding her close. Mina lay in Jones's steadfast embrace for the rest of her life. The luxuriant bedroom was illuminated by the moonlight, her heart beating softly against his chest. She wrapped them in a silence and warmth blanket, and as the night wore on, she couldn't help but wonder how her, from being a lone, broken, and enslaved girl trapped under, life had changed so drastically. Amara's cruelty in becoming the beloved wife of the most powerful man she had ever known, a man who revered her, she was treated like the most prized possession in his world, with each glance, touch, and whisper. She also lightly traced the sharp edges of his jawline with her fingers as she gazed up at his perfectly sculpted face. Her heart fluttered at the way his deep dark eyes watched her, filled with a hunger so raw, so possessive, that it made her entire body shiver beneath the thin silk sheets. Because even in the quiet moments, even when no words were spoken, she was left gasping for air as Jones's love for her burned brighter than any flamecon. Powerless to resist the magnetic pull between them, and when he suddenly reached out his strong fingers, brushing against her flushed cheek, tilting her face up to meet his piercing gaze, she felt her pulse quicken, her heart pounding so loudly that she was certain he could hear it. And when his thumb traced along his low, husky whisper, reached her trembling lower lip and sent, "You're mine, Mina. Every ounce of you, like waves of heat from SP, belongs to me." And the possessiveness in his voice, the unwavering certainty in his gaze made her heart ache in the most delicious way, because there was something so enticing about Jones's claim of her, the way he made her. She had the impression that she was the only woman in the world, and as he slowly but ferociously kissed her, she melted into him, completely surrendering to the fire that always ignited between them, a fire that had only grown stronger with every passing night, because no matter how many times he touched her, no matter how many nights they spent tangled in each other's arms, it always felt new, always left her breathless, craving more. And as his hands slid down her body, tracing every curve with maddening slowness, she whimpered softly against his mouth, her heart racing as his touch set her skin ablaze. Because with Jones, they were consumed by an overwhelming need, not hesitation or fear, both binding them together with a fiery passion unbreakable to the point where it seemed as though the entire universe had worked together to bring them together. As he intensified the kiss, as his hands were on her waist, and he pulled her closer until there was no more room, Mina felt herself completely unravel, her heart in the space between them, pounding with a love and desire that was so strong it made her shake in his arms, because no one had No one had ever touched her like this before. She had never felt so loved, so completely his. And when he finally broke the kiss, his breath hot against his dark eyes were filled with molten desire, and he whispered against her swollen lips. Her ear, I could spend 1,000 nights like this, and still never get enough of you. And the raw honesty in his voice made her heart clench, made her eyes well up with tears because she knew he meant every word, knew that this man, this ruthless, powerful billionaire who could have any woman he wanted had selected her, had fallen madly in love with her so deeply that he couldn't bear to be apart from her, even for a moment. And as his hands were worshipped, as he trailed kisses down her neck and along her collarbone, she felt herself sinking even further, losing every delicate muscle in her, completely in him, because he made her feel like the center of attention. His entire world, and he whispers, I love you with every tenderness. By his touch, he replaced the pain of her past with a love so pure, so consuming, to the point where she lost her breath. And as the night wore on, as their bodies intertwined in a dance of passion and longing, Mina realized that she had never truly lived until she had become his, never truly known what it meant to be loved until Jones had claimed her heart, her soul, and every inch of her trembling body. And as she clung to him, her nails digging into his broad shoulders, she whispered his name, like a prayer, her voice trembling with the weight of everything she felt for him. And in that moment, as he buried his face in her neck, as he kissed her, with a desperation that spoke of how completely she had ruined him, she knew that this was destined to remain forever, unbreakable by any force in the world. They had an unbreakable bond because it was more than just love and desire, a devotion that was so strong that it defied all logic and was like the first light. Jones pulled her closer as dawn broke through the curtains and cast a golden glow over their entwined bodies. As he whispered, "You're mine," he gave her a long-lasting kiss on the forehead. "Mina, forever and ever." And with those words and the resounding promise of quiet through the silence of the early morning, Mina closed her eyes, letting herself sleep in the arms of the man who had not only saved her from a life of suffering and isolation, but also from herself, but had also given her a love so fierce, so consuming, that it had transformed her into the woman she was always meant to be. And she knew with absolute certainty, as her heart beat in perfect harmony with his, Mina awoke in Jones's arms with the assurance that this was only the beginning of their forever together. The love in their hearts grew as the early morning sun shone through their mansion's grand windows, creating as she looked at the man who had changed her life, she saw a golden glow over their entwined bodies. She was overwhelmed by not only her love, but also a world she had never imagined, with feelings because it still felt like a dream that she had gotten away from her stepmother's cruelty and was now living in a world in which she was adored beyond measure, and her every breath was filled with love, passion, and safety. And as Jones stirred, he pulled her even closer with a strong hand in his deep, husky voice. She felt her body tremble under his voice as he murmured her name as though it were a sacred vow. Touched because, even now, after countless passionate nights and endless moments of, he still had an intimacy that made her heart race and gave her the impression that she was the only woman in the world. And as his lips eventually seized her lips in a trail that ran down her cheek and over her forehead, she melted into him with a slow, bitter kiss, her fingers running her body, responding to him through his thick, dark hair, with a desire that persisted throughout every moment because Jones was like the first time he touched, talked, or looked at anyone. Fire that wouldn't go out, and his intense eyes locked as he pulled away. On to hers, whispering me with a love so strong it hurt her breath. "Mina, you are my everything, my life, my soul, which is the reason my heart beats." And those words are full of unfiltered truth and unwavering devotion, made tears well up in her eyes because she knew he meant them. Knew that she had become the center of his world, just as he had become the center of hers. And as he brushed a thumb, he leaned back in, his eyes darkening across her lips and filled with unspoken promises, kissing her deeply, passionately, claiming her all over again, as if he could never get enough of her, as if she was the air he breathed, And when they finally broke apart, gasping for air, their foreheads, he whispered, "I want you forever, Mina, in every lifetime, in every," pressing his lips together. World in those words spoken with such conviction made her heart swell with an unbearable amount of love, because she knew she had found her forever in him, and as the day stretched on, filled with Mina, found herself surrounded by stolen kisses, tender touches, and endless love moments. Thinking about how far she had come, how the scared, lonely girl who had once feared the world had now blossomed into a woman who was cherished beyond reason, a woman who no longer felt threatened because Jones was by her side. And when the evening came, Jones surprised her with a grand celebration, a romantic dinner under the stars where he held her close as they danced to the soft melody of love, spoke sweetly to her, making her feel like the most precious thing in the world. Woman in existence, and as they sat together wrapped in each other's embrace, Mina felt an unfamiliar emotion rise within her, a deep longing, a yearning for something even greater. And Jones smiled knowingly as he observed her hand resting on her stomach. Lips and with a tenderness that made her heart race, he whispered, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" My love, and at that moment Mina's eyes widened as realization dawned upon her, as she felt a deep warmth spread through her body, because she had felt different for days, an unexplainable sensation in her heart. She then whispered Ed with a trembling nod as tears welled up in her eyes. "Jones, I think, I think we're going to have a baby." And the moment those words left her lips, Jones froze, his eyes widening with shock, with disbelief, before pure, unfiltered joy lit up his face. And in the next second he pulled, she was taken up into his arms. And as he turned her around and lifted her off the ground, laughter and joy filled the night air. Because this was the greatest gift, the greatest blessing. And as he placed her down gently, his hands trembling, as they cued her face, he whispered, "You've made me the happiest man in the world, Mina." And as their lips met once again, as they sealed this perfect moment with a love-filled kiss that left them breathless, Mina knew that this was their happily ever after, because they were no longer just two souls. Bound by love, they were about to become a family. And as the star twinkled above them, as the universe bore witness to their love, Mina closed her eyes, letting herself get lost in the warmth of Jones's acceptance, knowing that from now on, every moment would be filled with boundless passion and the promise of a forever that would never fade.